Go with confidence to Him at any time, any place, anywhere, and come before Him and ask and knock and seek and see Him working on our behalf in such ways. As I was preparing this, I was thinking about our God who's a good Father. And I was thinking about all the ways that God has used this redemptive grace in my life of being able to see Him as a good Father. I was reminded of just the ways that God, like a good Father, has provided for me. I'm reminded of when I was growing up in Eastern Kentucky, also a place where people like to get away from the law. I was reminded of God's grace and how He provided a church that would live on mission and go on a mission trip and preach the gospel. I was reminded as we talked on Wednesday night about praying, and as we talked through that, I was reminded of a young man named Jimmy Blackburn. Jimmy Blackburn was a special needs kind of person. He was in his 40s. He came to church with his mom, whose name was Helen Blackburn, Mouthcard Baptist Church. And David Steele on Wednesday night, he said, turn in your hymnals to 475. And without even looking, I already knew what the song was. The song in most Baptist hymnals on 475 is Victory in Jesus. And the reason I know that is because when I was a kid, when his 16th birthday, it was a great time. We had the police outside the church, and they told my dad he couldn't preach there that week. And they had a church member that took his gun and shot up our cars that week because they were mad at us. It was a different time. It was a different place. I'm so thankful you're all not like that. And so that had happened a few weeks before that, and everything started to blow up at our church. Every business meeting, we had to have special called business meetings. I found out about a guy named Robert. He has rules of order, and I found out about him that he wrote a book, and we had to follow that. So we had a special called business meeting almost every 2 weeks where they would vote whether or not my dad would remain as pastor. Well, the Lord, by His grace, allowed Dad to stay there as pastor, and the votes were like, you know, in a church that ran 50 people, the votes on those Wednesday nights when everybody would gather in, they were like 40 to 44, right? And we would be like, oh, we get to stay in our house. Praise the Lord. Because we were also living in the parsonage, which is why people knew where to come shoot us, and those kind of things. And I'm reminded that one time I went to get a high school physical to play basketball, and there was the guy who shot up our cars, and he chased us. He chased us. My mom was driving. She didn't know where to go. Luckily, we had a church member. She had somebody taking care of her property, and he got out with his gun, started hitting on our windows and said, where's that chicken liver husband of yours, right? All this kind of stuff. He threatened to kill us all. And luckily, there was a guy named Tim, and he also had a gun, and he came down and chased him away. Praise the Lord. I'm thankful for God, how He provided. See, I'm thankful for how God provided you, because I never knew a church could be like this. I got to thinking, when Jana and I had our first son, we had just transitioned to a different role, and we didn't have insurance that would cover labor and delivery. Now, I'm thankful that God, in the way that He's a good Father, that He provided that for us. I'm thankful the way that God had provided for us when He asked us to move, and we see all the ways that God has guided our lives there. But God doesn't only provide as a good Father. I'm thankful that He protects. Obviously, I'm thankful for His protection in those seasons when people are threatening us. But I'm also thankful for how He protected me from answering all my prayers, right? And you know Billy Graham's wife, she said, I'm so thankful that God didn't answer all my prayers. I would have married the wrong person 5 times before I met Billy Graham. And I think probably some of you have that same thankfulness in your life about the Lord. I'm thankful how He protected me in my relationships. I'm thankful for how He protected me in my route and the pathway that God placed me on and where He's taken me and the job opportunities, and thankful to serve as your pastor. I'm thankful for the rescue that He rescued me from other vain pursuits and worldly pursuits that I was pursuing, and by His grace He just moved me and called me into this calling. I'm thankful that not only did He provide, not only did He protect, but He gave us a peace that passes all understanding. I'm thankful that the first time I ever got to share my testimony, it was on a Sunday night, and we all gathered in, and there was about 40 of us there, and we're also there at Forest Hills Baptist Church, and I'm a senior in high school, and we have this moment where they're saying, anybody like to share their testimony? And then people are standing up, sharing things that God has done, and all of a sudden, before I even realize it, I'm standing up. And my knees are shaking. I didn't want to stand up, right? And everybody looks at me, and somebody comes with a little microphone. And I go, oh, no, I don't need a microphone. There's only 40 people here, right? And I'm thinking about that moment and how God used that moment to allow me to share some of what God had protected us from at the last place and how He guided us to that place. I'm thankful that when my father committed suicide, I remember driving back from Louisville, Kentucky. We had 2 services, and I'm reminded that I cried all the way from Louisville, Kentucky, just down south, 65, coming back to Florence. It was the first funeral I'd ever done. And I was feeling guilty because I thought I did a bad job at it. And I was just crying and crying. I was angry with my dad for making that decision in his life. I was angry about a lot of things. I was grieving. And suddenly, the Lord provided His peace. And I'm not kidding you. It felt like the Lord was sitting with me in that passenger seat from southern Kentucky all the way back to Alabama. See, our God is a good Father. And maybe you got stories about your father, your earthly father, that let you down, or He didn't come through. Maybe you had an earthly pastor that did that. I had both. But God provided a good Father, a perfect Father.